My next guest is Jane Fox, author of a fabulous book, The Hungry Mother: Recipes for Recovery and Life in the Kitchen.
You are watching Profonde TV with host Phyllis Haynes.
One of the things you say in your book that I found fascinating because I've interviewed many people who've told me stories over the years about recovery. But one of the things that you said that I found fascinating was the challenge of finding healthy pleasures, and that if they weren't sufficient, um, something would happen. Can you explain? Because I think you do a better job than I will in explaining that.
Sure. The idea is once you get I've been sober for almost 40 years. And at some point, you're no longer an ex-addict. You're a regular person, and you have to fill your life up with joy and people and what normal people do, what normal regular people do, that brings pleasure and connection into your life. And you just can't go through life just being sober without any of these things. And for me, the cooking was part of that wonderful, gee, I enjoy this. Gee, I must be a good cook. Oh, I must be a good person. And it kind of builds into it builds up your ego, it builds up your confidence. And also that's what life is about. It's now that you're sober, enjoy it, revel in it, and find things that, when I started using all hobbies and passions, I didn't have any. It's impossible. But once you get sober, let the real person come through and develop all those things that you always enjoyed or always wanted to try. And it's a real saving grace.
Well, I just want to push back a little bit because when I read your story, and your book, as I said, reads like a magnificent tale. It should be a movie, even though there are recipes in your book. It should be a film. It's an amazing book. But you talk about
what's from your lips to God's
you talk about the high. No, don't be sorry. This is great. You talk about the high that you had, even selling drugs, that your life fell into the challenge of becoming an addict and needing to make money and getting into the lifestyle of, I can't even call it a lifestyle, it's a death style, really, of selling drugs. So how can healthy pleasures even compare with that life that you lived?
Well, there was always listen, you always know there's an element of, first of all, it's illegal. And second of all, there's an element of danger that really, if you value your life, you're not going to take those kinds of risks that put you at risk of losing losing your freedom or your life. And, but you asked a very good question. That's the point. The point is, whatever thrill I got from copying drugs, hanging out with all those people, and just keep in mind, this was also like in the 70s and the 80s when, well, not so much the 80s, but it was a culture behind it. It wasn't the street horror that you see now. You can find such joy. Like, for instance, I took up sailing. I always wanted to sail. I shouldn't have bought a sailboat. I was a single parent, but that sailboat saved me. It saved me because you go out on that boat, no matter what was bothering you before, you have to leave that on land and focus on getting home in one piece. So it was a pretty good vehicle for me.
So that answers the question for me because, your book was highly recommended to me, but my reaction when I first heard it was, I'm one of those people who hates to cook. I love serving a beautiful plate and having a lovely table, but the process of shopping and preparing and cooking for me is terrible. I do it well, but it's not a love for me. So I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to talk to this person? But your book actually helped me through it. Your book actually
Yes.
gave me some insight into what's good about cooking. So share with the audience, what is good about cooking?
Yes, I call it culinary meditation. When I multitask and decide I'm going to make a recipe, I have to focus on that. I have to kind of clear the decks emotionally. And I start planning, well, maybe I'll make it this way or I'll make it that way. And when I'm in a awkward spot, if I'm feeling a lot, or even in early sobriety, when you might still be contemplating using, there's something about the process of chopping and peeling and cleaning and those steps can really ground you and free you from the anxiety that you were experiencing prior to cooking. And and despite it all, like, you got through that bad moment and you made something really good too that people liked and that you liked and you enjoyed.
Okay, well, you also have another important experience in your book that I think will help many people. And that is that you did not have complete sobriety all straight from the first time you tried it. You actually fell back. So, talk about that period and what caused you to fall back into using and how you got yourself out of it.
Yes, so I got sober in 1976, and I was sober for 15 years. I had a great career. I got married. I had children. I was very lucky. I lived in Manhattan, and I got while I was still living in rehab, I got a job at an ad agency. And in rehab, you're not allowed to make phone calls. You have no privileges. And this ad agency, there was a phone on my desk. And I was so excited. I went to work early every day. I stayed late every day. I felt like a real person. And so I had a really good 15 years. And then my marriage imploded very suddenly and on a very bad level. I found out I was pregnant with our second child when I found out my husband was not faithful and he was very seriously involved with other women. So when that fell apart, I had an infant and a toddler, and also I had been very involved in a business. He owned a rehab in Manhattan, and I was the spokesperson. I did their marketing. It was a mom and pop, and all of a sudden that was off limits to me. I could not work there. I wasn't allowed to work there, and my whole world came crashing down, and I started off with a sleeping medication. I found a psychiatrist. I was not honest with him. I did not tell him my history. And it started off very, oh, you're divorced, you're having trauma. Oh, here's a pill to go to sleep, or here's a pill to calm your anxiety. And before you know it, one pill for me turns into two. If you've been an addict, your tolerance, it's like a snapshot from the last time that you did drugs. It's not, I don't have the normal tolerance of someone who's been clean all their lives. It takes a lot for me to feel the effects of medication. So I wasn't so bad for about 2 years. And then the second or third year, I got really bad bronchitis and discovered codeine cough syrup. And back in the 90s, it was still handwritten prescriptions. They were not done by electronically as they are now. And I forged prescriptions all over wherever I could. And I was addicted to codeine cough syrup for 2 years.
Well, how did you snap yourself back into sobriety the next time? What was it? Is the discovery? Take us through the discovery of getting better.
I was having trouble with my divorce, and I went to see an attorney, and thank God he was in a 12-step program. And he took one look at me. He goes, "Lady, I can't help you unless you get sober first." And I was mortified. "Oh, you mean you can tell? I thought I had it so well hidden." And so I had to tell my parents. I now had an infant and a toddler. No, actually, they were older. They were probably like 5 and 9. And I was able to I was terrified that I would lose custody. I mean, this is a big deal. If my spouse would find out that I had substance abuse issues, custody would become a real, and that scared the daylights out of me. And I was very lucky. I had the means. I found the best addiction psychiatrist in New York City is someone by the name of Dr. Mark Gallanter. He's head of addiction studies at NYU Langone. And I saw him 3 or 4 times a week for 3 times a week for 6 months, and then twice a week for another 6 months, and then once a week for another year. And he really straightened me out.
But you had to straighten yourself out too. I mean, this had to be, in addition to his help, you had to decide once and for all to be sober.
Yes, it had to do with motherhood. Motherhood was I always wanted to be a mom. And remember, when I got sober, I was already in my late 20s when I was back in, working. I was clean and sober. And I was almost 30 years old. I wasn't married. And I always wanted to be a mom. And I had these beautiful daughters, and the thought of losing them because I wanted to get high it snapped me out of it.
Gotcha.
Snapped me out of it.
Well, I think that what's special about you is your story is not preachy. It's got some great devices. The book is filled with wonderful quotes and ideas. So I really think that you're doing a service. Was it hard for you to tell people about this? I mean, you mentioned that you spoke to your publisher, and was it hard to reveal yourself in your story?
Here's the dilemma. I've always been very proud of being a sober mom. I never hid that. Once I got sober, people knew I was sober. I was happy to tell anyone who would listen to me that I was sober. And it was also important for the household. I was a single parent household. There was no alcohol in our house. It was very strict. I never revealed the details. In other words, people knew I was sober. We all know when we go to a 12-step meeting, we know everybody's sober there. And people share parts of their story, depending on the circumstance. But this was my entire history that I had never shared with anyone. And I was like, oh my God, what did I do? I gave everyone the details. That was the part I was mortified, not mortified, but I went, oh, I hadn't thought of this. So.
What are your children's reaction? They're older now. What was their reaction?
It's funny. They are proud of me, but I don't think they really want to know the details, to tell you the truth. I think they want to just look at me at who I am today and not go back and to see who I was, the shady lady. They don't want to know that part.
Well, they will be stronger for knowing your whole story and for reading it. Now, you've gone on not only to write this book, but you formed an organization called Narali. Can you tell us about what Narali is?
Yes. So the opioid epidemic was really out of control starting in 2016, 2017. And I had been living in Florida and got involved with this program called the Jewish Recovery Center. You have to remember that Florida has the greatest amount of rehab beds in the country. So you end up with young people or adults coming from Chicago and Toronto and everywhere. And if they were Jewish, the families were concerned, what are they going to do for the holidays? Where are they going to have a service? Where are they going to have a nice meal on a Friday night. So there's this charismatic rabbi from Brooklyn, moved to Florida and started a program so Jewish kids in program could come there every Friday night for a meal. And he would create like a meeting that was just phenomenal. He would incorporate Jewish traditions with the 12 steps, and I had never seen anything like that. So I volunteered there. I worked there Friday nights, and each year we had a workshop where people would come from all over the country, and the rabbi where I live was getting, this is in 2015, 16, 17, he was getting phone calls. My wife, my grandchild, my grandson, my sister, he was getting all these calls regarding addiction. He didn't have any answers. So he decided to go to this workshop in Boca Raton. And I was running, I was part of the greeting committee. And I said to him, well, funny that you're in Glen Cove, I'm moving back there. He said, well, why don't we do something? We'll do something together. And that's when we started this Northeast Recovery, the Northeast Alliance for Sobriety. And it's basically bringing that dialogue. Our goal is to break the stigma and start a conversation. The more places people talk about what's going on, what they're experiencing with someone that they love, a family member, a colleague, more solutions become available. But the first step is you have to talk about it.
All right, I'm going to ask you a hard question. It's a question before our country right now. How do you get someone to not get addicted? If you could go back, or if you could help have people avoid addiction, is that a possible thing?
I think for the addicted person, that's pretty tough. What I focus on is the family members, because if someone's in the throes of addiction, they're not going to stop on their own unless they stand to lose. Look, I could have lost my children. That really put a big stop sign. That was my brick wall. But for other people, I think family members and friends, they have to trust your instincts. You don't need proof. If you feel, if you've watched their behavior and everything change in the past few months, you don't need proof to see them actually putting the drugs in their mouth or however they choose to do it. Go by your gut and seek help that person, and seek help for yourself so you can carry that person, you can champion their recovery. To answer your question, there's not much you can say to people, except now with the horrible thing with fentanyl. I would say that's a pretty big signal that you just can't try anything. You just can't do it. It's just not like it used to be. It's Russian roulette.
Thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to add that we have not discussed in this interview?
I would say you asked it in the very beginning. It's the idea of finding joy and comfort, the steady, quiet hum of peace in your life. If you're not doing drugs, the drama's gone. There's so much drama out there already. Why add to it with your own personal drama and the heartbreak and the financial strain and the alienation? When people get high, it's because they want to be by themselves. They want to isolate. So what we need to do is form strong connections with people. And, and if you see a loved one or someone that you care about, reach out to them.
Thank you so much, Jane. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
I think that we've come to the point in the world that everyone knows that success is not about having the biggest house and the best car. I think we've come to a point in creation that people have seen enough of the people who have everything and it does not fill them up. They have the beautiful house on the hill. They walk into it. It's like one of those Hollywood movie sets. It's just empty on the other side. It doesn't take away the emptiness inside. So from the beginning, when I started Yes to Success in 1980, 42 years ago, I've always taught that success is an inside out job, because if you learn how to create inner success, inner silence, inner happiness, then when you walk through the doors of your new house, then it's a joy. Then you have a lot of fun decorating it. But until you do the inner work, I just want people to know that they should stop striving for the next shiny object, because I promise you, it will not bring you the success or the happiness that you desire. But there are ways that you can have that. And then once you have the inner success also, you will find it so much easier to manifest the outer success, because there's not so much neediness. There's not so much, pulling and striving. You can relax because you're already successful on the inside. And then whether your book becomes a New York Times bestseller or it doesn't, it's okay, because you learned what you needed to learn along the way. You established the relationships that are bringing you happiness along the way, and you know what to do next time if you still want that #1 bestseller. So that saying, success is a journey, it's not a destination. It really is a journey. And it's really important to enjoy that journey, because the truth is, you don't know if you're going to wake up tomorrow morning. So you don't know if you're ever going to reach that goal. So you might as well enjoy every day.
You've worked internationally. So how does your message read on this point, where so many people are hungry for the American dream?
I became a teacher of transcendental meditation, and I taught TM throughout the decade of the 70s, and I was an administrator at Maharishi International University. And when I wasn't working for the TM movement, I was with Maharishi, just studying how to create inner silence and teaching meditation to thousands. But at the end of the decade of the 70s, I came to the conclusion that woman does not live by mantra alone. And I needed to have things that grownups have. I was pushing the big 3-0, and I thought, I better get some health insurance. I better get some car insurance, or at least a car to insure. So I thought to myself, okay, how do people make a lot of money? Because I wanted to make a lot of money fast and go back to teaching meditation. And I thought, what they do? They move to LA and they sell investments. And because, in the movies, it looked like everybody in LA was wealthy. So I was living in a meditation community in Fairfield, Iowa. I moved to LA. I started selling investments. I was pretty much a dismal failure. In other words, although there's no such thing as failure, it's just learning ways not to do it next time. But I didn't sell one investment except to my father, who felt sorry for me. However, that expression, we make plans and God laughs. Well, God had a big yuck over me, thinking I was going to make a lot of money moving to LA. And the Creator, the God of your understanding, had different plans for me. One night I'm in LA, somebody invites me to an event at the Learning Annex, and the guy was talking about the law of attraction. I'd never heard this before. It was 1980, decades before The Secret made this kind of a household concept. And he was saying that we are like tuning forks, and however we vibrate, a tuning fork that's vibrating at an F sharp cannot attract to itself a B flat. It repels the B flat. Can only attract an F sharp. And he said, if we are vibrating with poverty thoughts, if we are vibrating with, I'll never be successful, my parents weren't successful, those people in Beverly Hills are all crooks, all of these things that people say about wealth and outer success, you will never vibrate it to yourself. Even you want a soulmate, but you say, oh, I'm too old, nobody wants me, I've been divorced so many times, I'm a loser, I'm not good at relationships. You're repelling. That's what you're vibrating. You're repelling any glorious relationship that wants to be attracted to you. You're the F sharp, it's the B flat. So what you want to do is you want to start talking about the glorious life that is ahead for you, the wonderful relationship that is ahead for you, the financial abundance that is ahead for you. So I go to this presentation at the Learning Annex, and every cell in my body is vibrating, and I realize that's why I came to LA. I'm going to teach what this guy is teaching. And what I did is I started studying the great masters of success and prosperity, like Napoleon Hill and Florence Scovel Shinn and Wallace Wattles. And I put together, I called the company Yes to Success. And I used 3 principles that allowed me to become pretty much successful overnight. One is, I learned these from the great masters. One is, an idea comes to you because it needs to be manifested through you, that the God of your understanding needs something manifested on the planet at this time, whispers that idea in your ear. That's why we all have different ideas, right? You have the idea to do the show. I have the idea to teach success. Somebody else has the idea to become a chiropractor. Somebody else to grow orchids and write a book on it. So the God of your understanding needs that manifested on the planet at the time, kind of looks down to see a worthy vehicle who will go ahead and take the steps to bring it into reality. And that's why we have ideas, because they're needed at that time. And so many of your listeners, I'm sure, have had the experience of having an incredible idea, not taking steps to manifest it. A few years later, somebody else did. And they became millionaires, or they became famous, or they became household names with your idea. So number one, an idea comes to you because it's yours and it needs to be manifested. And then the second is, what is sacred needs to be kept secret. And that means that when you have an idea, don't go around telling everybody what you're going to do. Not because I think they're going to steal your idea. I don't believe that. I believe there could be thousands of people teaching success, thousands of people giving talks on leadership, thousands of people becoming acupuncturists. But when you tell everybody what you're going to do, you use all the energy up in the telling. And the other thing that you run the risk of is running up against the discouragement committee. And you know who they are, those people,
Oh, yes.
right, Phyllis? The discouragement committee. They're going to tell you all the reasons why your idea is not going to work. So the tiny seed of your idea is crushed before it even has a chance to blossom. So be careful with who you share your cherished ideas. What is sacred, and your idea is sacred, needs to be kept secret. Just yourself. Don't say, oh, well, my mother never is at the discouragement committee. Be careful. And then when you do the next point, and that is take a step from which there's no turning back, at that point, you can go ahead and tell people, because if the discouragement committee shows up, sorry. I mean, what I did, hey, I was 29 years old. I hadn't done anything in my life except teach meditation and sell one investment to my father. And I was going to teach seminars on how to be successful. But that idea was whispered into my ear after I went to that event at the Learning Annex. So I knew it was mine. I didn't tell anybody what I was going to do. For 6 months, I put this thing together. And my friends are, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then I took a step from which there is no turning back. I rented a room at the Santa Monica Public Library, put up posters, because that's what we did in 1980, 1981. And then the discouragement committee did show up and say, really, your mind creates your reality? A talk on I don't think so. but I had taken that step from which there's no turning back. So maybe you're writing a book. Maybe your step is to ask somebody to write your introduction, ask people to give you an endorsement. Whatever it is, your step from which there's no turning back, take it. And that also gives you the momentum. And if you go in the wrong direction, which is okay too, because then you can course correct, but you can't steer a parked car. You got to get it out of the driveway.